think this is like an evolution of search, right? In the past, we would click on the different results that are the ones that we find most interesting, and now we're kind of letting these tools answer those questions for us. Today, I've probably used different large language models like 30 or 40 times. At the end of the day, these tools are looking for consensus across trustworthy sources. I think digital PR just became 1,000 times more important.
Hello and welcome to the Marketers Debrief podcast from Journey Further, coming to you from New York City, fresh off the back of a brilliant Discovered event that we held this morning. My name's Billy and I'm joined by our keynote speaker of that event, Vice President of SEO Strategy and Research at AMSIV, and just an overall SEO icon, Lily Ray. Lily, hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
More than welcome. Firstly, did you enjoy yourself this morning?
I had a great time. It's a really good crowd, good vibes.
It really was. It really was. Right. So our Discovered event this morning really explored what it takes for brands to stay discoverable and competitive in this kind of ever-changing world of search. Particularly, and there was a lot of chat across all the sessions, and yourself in particular, about with the likes of AI and LLMs really coming into the fold, how they are having a profound impact on how SEO is evolving and how we as humans are searching. And there's so much that I want to cover over the next sort of 20 minutes. But I want to start with quite a broad question to begin with, if that's all right. Should brands and marketers right now be concerned or excited about the state of search and the future to come?
I think that answer to that question depends on the nature of the brand and the website, and particularly how they make money. So a lot of sites have been kind of comfortable getting a lot of traffic and making money through organic search, right? And I think that the way things are changing in the SEO space, we can expect those traffic numbers to change pretty substantially. Mm-hmm. So if you monetize from display ads, affiliate links, kind of just traffic and page views, I think it's going to be a really challenging conversation to have right now about what that's going to look like, because I think pretty much across the board, especially for more like information type queries, we can expect to see lower traffic going forward. But, if you're in the business of selling products and services or something, the way that people discover you might be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be selling those products and services. So it doesn't change too much on that front.
Has there ever been this much change within the world of SEO and within the world of search?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because we are an industry where so much changes all the time. So at least in the 15 years that I've been doing SEO, this feels like the most volatile and the most change that we're seeing in the shortest amount of time. But there's been a lot of kind of like hype cycles throughout SEO history where with mobile first indexing or AMP or something else that becomes kind of the new hot topic, or voice search, right? We all think that we have to change everything we're doing, but then it ultimately kind of becomes the same thing we've always been doing. But I do think with these new platforms, it's absolutely going to change how people search.
You mentioned some of those, that gains a lot of hype and then they kind of die off. Whereas I feel like AI and LLMs, they're not going to be one of these hype things that just dies off.
Yeah, no, I think this is like an evolution of search, right? This is taking what information we've always been like searching for and finding on search engines and kind of synthesizing it into answers that are from generative AI tools that kind of summarize the answers to the questions you were already looking for. So it's kind of like a new representation or manifestation of what we've always done with search engines in the past. But I absolutely agree. This is probably the most fundamental shift in how people are consuming information, just because in the past we would click on the different results that are the ones that we find most interesting, and now we're kind of letting these tools answer those questions for us.
Yeah, you shared a fascinating stat in your presentation this morning. 27% of Americans interact with Gen AI almost daily, and 17% of chatbot usage goes towards search inquiries. Mm-hmm. Talk us through how that is evolving SEO and the way that we are searching.
Yeah, so I think, again, it kind of boils down to the nature of the query. If people are, and again, 17% it's a big number, but it's not that big when you think about all the other ways that people might be using large language models. So I think it's really important to note that, yes, large language models are serving as a replacement to traditional search for many different types of queries. People are going onto ChatGPT to answer or ask questions that they previously asked Google, but there's a lot of other data points that show that people still are going to Google after they have these conversations on large language models, and also that people are using large language models for many different things beyond just search, the way that we've traditionally searched. So coming up with articles or creative answers to questions or writing poems or writing music or coding, right? These are not really ways that we used to use search engines. So I think there's a lot of overlap between the two tools, but they also serve kind of distinct functions as well.
Yeah, I recently used ChatGPT to write out an itinerary for my 4 days in Marrakesh.
Cool.
And it was brilliant.
Amazing.
What's the last thing you used the likes of ChatGPT for outside of work, just, personal?
Yeah, honestly, I use it. I feel like I use it all day, every day, especially the voice mode. When I used to kind of search for something, like to fact check something when I'm having a conversation with a friend or something. Of course, I used to go to Google and dig that up. And now I feel like a lot more of that is happening on large language models, especially with voice mode. But I couldn't even tell you because honestly, today I've probably used different large language models like 30 or 40 times,
Really, yeah.
Yeah, I use it all the time for everything.
What do you think the kind of public perception is when it comes to trust? How much do people trust that the information that they're getting from these LLMs is correct, either more so or less than the likes of Google? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different perspectives floating around. There's also a lot of different sentiment around AI. So I feel like people that don't like AI or maybe feel very threatened by AI are more likely to think that it's not accurate. There's also a whole discourse happening about how reliable these tools actually are, how much they hallucinate. There's a lot of great new research out there about the fact that hallucinations are kind of always going to be inevitable with LLMs, which I think is something very important for us to consider. But the truth is that there's always been challenges with Google and the other search engines to get information right as well. I think right now the most important thing to focus on is trying to understand how these tools work and what the limitations are. For example, knowing when you need to turn on, search with the internet on ChatGPT compared to just relying on the training data. Like these are skills that I think the average person using these tools should become very aware of as they're using the tools.
Yeah, 100%. AI overviews are, from a consumer's perspective, incredibly helpful. You ask it a question, you immediately get it at the top of the page. It requires no click. But from a brand perspective, probably really not helpful because it's going to massively minimize traffic. Is that something which brands should be concerned about, or is there a way in which they can actually use AI overviews in their benefit?
Yeah, I think it totally depends on what the AI overview responds with. So, for example, if you're typing what we call a navigational query, so the first one that comes to mind was actually like 2 years ago when I was kind of doing a lot of beta testing on what used to be called Search Generative Experience, SGE. It's now called AI Overviews. I typed Virgin Airlines, and it came up with a generative AI response about everything to know about Virgin Airlines except for the company website, right? And I feel like, especially if you're Virgin Airlines, but also if you're a consumer who's kind of accustomed to using search engines to find a website, that might be more of a frustrating response than just like the way search used to be, where it just served you the website, right? So I think like brands should be concerned to the extent that there's a lot of branded queries and people even asking, what's the best airline, right? You want to see how the AI responds. That's very important for airline companies to consider. But, at the same time, in many cases, the searcher's getting directly what they need. And maybe that it doesn't necessarily impact, like it might impact your traffic, but it also might lead to more sales, right? If your brand was presented in a good light. So I feel like at the end of the day, you should be monitoring these responses.
In your presentation, you also covered Google AI mode, which is currently, am I right in saying it's slowly being rolled out here in the States?
Yeah, it's available for everybody in the States, I believe on desktop. Every day it's changing, but right now it's available in the US. It's a new tab that you can access in Google Search on the left side of Google Search, right next to the All button. And I believe India as well, but they're starting to scale it out to more countries going forward.
Yeah, I've definitely not seen it yet in the UK, but I imagine it's very, very soon. You were quoted recently in the BBC saying that if Google makes AI mode the default in its current form, it's going to have a devastating impact on the internet. Devastating, quite the word. Talk us through your thinking there.
Yeah, and there was a reason why I said in its current form, because AI mode, like everything AI, is changing every day. So I want to be very clear that, Google launched AI mode from what I would believe to be pretty quick, like pretty fast, like it was in beta for kind of a few months and now it's available to the public. So I think they're making improvements and changes to it every day. That being said, I've been doing a lot of testing on the current version, and what I believe is that the current version is almost like designed to keep the user in AI mode as much as possible. The links that AI mode generates in its responses often have this dotted line link, which actually usually means a link back to Google's own products or a new Google search, as opposed to a link to an external website. I'm seeing a lot of those dotted line links that might take you to Google Shopping or Google Maps. So instead of linking to a company website, they might embed a Google business profile directly in AI mode. And the result of that is you're not going to see a lot of traffic to external websites. So any company that relies on traffic or cares about traffic or even rankings, that's just going to be completely different in this new AI mode.
For sure. What are then the other things that brands can dial up if traffic is going to potentially start to minimize due to, the likes of AI mode and LLMs taking?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are now talking about visibility within these answers, right? You want your brand to be mentioned as a trustworthy resource or having great products and services. You want the entities and the people that work at your company to be highlighted in a positive light, right? There's a lot of ways that you can think about what the answer is actually saying and how do we report back on those metrics. And that's what I mentioned with tools like Profound and ZipTie and everything. We can kind of say, we see that the answers are presenting the brand in a positive light or maybe in a negative light. So we need to do that work. But as it stands right now, it's going to be very hard to even track AI mode accurately, especially as it becomes more personalized, because the answers are always different by design and they're going to be much more personalized going forward.
Let's talk visibility within LLMs. I think you mentioned some great tips in your presentation this morning. What can marketers do watching this sort of immediately or in the future to try and feature as accurately as possible?
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting moment because it's still very early days, and I feel like these tools are much more subject to manipulation than they probably will be in the next few months or years. Obviously they're improving these tools all the time, but it feels like we're in the very early days of SEO right now, where it was much more easy to influence the answers. So a lot of people have already caught on to the fact that it's relatively easy to influence LLM responses with things like LinkedIn, posting on LinkedIn, LinkedIn Pulse. All these tools are leaning into Reddit information very heavily. So there's still some subreddits out there that are susceptible to spam. You can find all kinds of kind of neglected subreddits where people are putting AI content and affiliate links, and that'll show up in large language models. So that type of stuff works for now. I personally don't think that that's the most long-term scalable solution to getting your brand mentioned, but I think we should also pay attention to the fact that these tools really seem to like user-generated content and social media content. So I wouldn't recommend going out there and talking about how your brand is the best across every social media platform, but maybe you can think about how is this brand engaging with the community? How is it putting out cohesive and consistent and good messaging across all these different platforms, because that seems to be right now what they're leaning the most heavily on to generate responses. And this is actually kind of an extension of what I've spoken about and many SEOs have spoken about for many years, which is EEAT, experience, expertise, authority, and trust. The more that you can have the people at your company kind of like as recognized entities that have their own accounts, they have their own opinions and everything like that, the more that that's going to kind of funnel into how your brand and its experts are perceived across LLM responses.
At Journey Further, we're huge advocates for digital PR. It's a service which we've been running since the agency's inception. It can be a really effective way to tell a brand story whilst acting as another trust signal to help rise up the rankings. I wanted to get your opinions on digital PR and how impactful that can be for everything SEO.
Yeah, I think digital PR just became 1,000 times more important in this kind of new landscape with generative AI, because at the end of the day, these tools are looking for consensus across trustworthy sources. So especially in like the e-commerce realm, for example, if you type into a large language model, what's the best running shoes for women, it's going to cite, let's say, the top 10 or top 20 kind of most well-respected, basically affiliate or product review websites that do these listicles where they're ranking products, right? So that's a digital PR play. You want to make sure that your brands and your products are mentioned on those publications. So I think there's going to be a lot of attention with, affiliate sites and product review sites and sites that kind of do these product roundups, because there's going to be more and more companies that want to make sure that they're included in those lists.
Interesting. Our digital PR team will be very pleased to hear you say that. Given the sort of turbulence at the moment within organic search, how important is it for brands to ensure that their organic teams are integrated as much as possible with their paid channels to sort of plug any gaps, or just to make sure that they're working in tandem and not against each other?
Yeah, I think it's as important as ever. And I think that there's some new reasons why it's extra important. For one, like tracking and reporting from, Google in particular, right? Like paid search teams tend to get more data than organic teams, and that's becoming increasingly true. I think like now we know that Google's going to give us some, AI mode data and some AI overview data in Search Console, but they're not breaking it out in any particular way. And from what I understand, they haven't claimed that they're doing this for paid search as well. But, at least with paid search, we can get conversion data on the search query level. So having that conversion data and that revenue data is essential for us to understand where to prioritize our efforts with SEO. I think if we know like something is never converting in paid search and maybe it has a lot of different, AI modules appearing and now click-through rates are much lower and traffic's much lower, maybe we don't need to prioritize that as much in SEO anymore.
Makes total sense. I loved part of your presentation this morning was about how, and this is so common within marketing, how we need to try and make every piece of content work as hard as possible. And you mentioned about how taking one piece of content and spinning it off into long form video, short form video, podcast, blog post can be so helpful for, again, helping feed the AI and the LLMs.
These platforms are multimodal, which means that they can get information not just from text, but they can get it from video and audio as well. And Google's also really doubling down on like Google Lens as well. So I think the more work that you can do to make sure that your content is visible across different types of content, so not just text, but audio and video and everything, splicing up your video into short videos and reels and everything, the more that you can get that messaging out there, especially considering that consumers are starting their searches across all these different platforms in different ways, the more effective it will be. But I do want to caveat that like if the content's not good, right? Or if the content's, let's say, like generated with AI and it's not really saying anything new or interesting, it's very homogenous, it's very robotic, like you're not necessarily going to see success with that.
Yeah. We've already covered so much. If anybody's taking any notes, then I'm sure their fingers are hurting right now. But I'd like to leave everyone with just some super clear actions to take forwards. What would be your top takeaways from what we've mentioned this morning and from your presentation earlier today?
I think for now, it's important to start to consider like monitoring and reporting for these new tools and new platforms, right? So like at the very least, you want to make sure that you're setting up tracking, referral tracking from different large language models in Google Analytics or whatever analytics tool you're using, because we're already starting to hear a lot of reports from people that yes, their organic traffic is lower, but they're starting to see an increase in traffic from large language models, and they're also seeing a much more engaged or like high converting audience. So that's something you want to understand, how your audience is actually using these tools. You also want to think about using some type of tracking or reporting tool, like I mentioned, Profound and Peak and ZipTie. Like you want to have those insights into how you're actually appearing in these tools. And then I would say really just like authentic marketing is essential. So being transparent about who you are, who your authors are, who your experts are, and why you can trust them, and then kind of encouraging those individuals to produce authentic, original content across many different platforms and using like a multimodal approach. So repurposing that content with audio and video and social media.
There's a heck of a lot there. So I asked for one or two top takeaways and you gave us many. So that's brilliant. Lily, thank you so much for that. We've covered so much. Thank you for watching. I just want a small plug from me. We have loads of content coming off the back of our New York and London Discovered events. They'll be hitting our socials very, very soon. So keep an eye out on the Journey Further socials for all of those. Thank you so much for joining us. Lily, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.